This is the place? The sheer horror in Weiss's voice was enough to make Yang snicker. Yeah, Junior's place wasn't exactly up to the standards Disney heiress was probably used to, but it was still a damn sight ritzier than the places in Vale. Well, at least for nightclubs. It looks like a dump. Weiss sighed. It sounds loud, Blake complained. I take this as some kind of information broker. Got it in one, kitty cat. Yang grinned. Junior's in the pocket of criminals, but he knows his stuff. At least, that was what she'd been told before. He hadn't been very useful on finding her mother, but knowing about an overrun town that was apparently in the media couldn't be that hard. Come to think of it, this is where I first met Jaune. At a place like this? Weiss sounded horrified, then paused and sighed. Why am I not even surprised? No idea, Weiss Cream. He wasn't here for information though. He was just drinking at the bar. It sounds better than our meeting at least. Blake grumbled. Yang made note to ask about that when she had some free time. It sounded like a fun story if Blake's reaction was any indication. So, the two of you drank together? Weiss asked. Yang? No. I may have started a fight with him. Really? Yang? You? Weiss sighed. Do you make it a habit of starting bar fights with people? Not anymore, she didn't. Not after it nearly landed her in a heap of trouble. It was a mistake. She sighed. I was angry. And Jaune did what he does best. Make you even angrier. He gave as good as he got and we both got in trouble for it. I guess it was a wake-up call for me, because I decided afterwards to not do anything like that again. Is that why you two were so awkward around one another when the term first started? Blake asked. I remember you would look at him awkwardly. That's rich coming from you. What was it? Natasha? Bethany? That and about 10 other names, Blake growled. Jaune was skilled at getting under the skin of all of us. Weiss said, it's incredible, really. But perhaps more incredible that we wrote it out and became a cohesive team. Now, are we going to sit here, or are we going to get this over with? Yang rolled her eyes to Blake, who smirked back, but they pushed the door open and entered the club regardless. The smoke and lights were familiar, but the dance floor was far emptier than it had been before. That was both a good and bad thing, for while it meant no risk of anyone getting hurt, it also meant Junior and his men saw them the moment they entered. You, the bearded man scowled. You've got a lot of nerve coming around here, girlie. Oh look, girlie. What a crippling insult. Yang rolled her eyes and ignored the goons that spread out around them. Weiss and Blake could deal with them if they had to, but she felt confident enough saying Junior knew that and wouldn't risk it. She'd taken them all down herself. No telling what 3 of them could do. Hey there, Junior. I like what you've done with the place. Business been going well since you repaired the damage I caused? It was. He grunted. Before another incident happened. Look, I've had it up to my neck with blondes, but I don't need any trouble. Tell me what you want and go. If you're after that woman, though, then I told you before, I don't know her. I'm not here for her, Yang said, sitting down on a stool. I'm not here to cause problems either, so you can calm down. Here, I'll even buy a drink. She pulled out her purse and pushed some line across the table. The familiarity of it seemed to calm Junior down a little, for he nodded and poured her a drink. Your friends want some? Weiss scrunched up her nose. She's a little high class for here, Yang whispered. Ignore her. Yeah, I can tell. Junior rolled his eyes and waved a hand behind her. From the corner of her eye, she saw the men spread out and begin to sit down again. She did, however, noticed the two sisters from before, who hovered on the edge of vision. "If you're here just for the info, then I don't mind letting bygones be bygones," he said. "Like I said, I've had enough crap lately without starting more. What do you need?" "We've got a little school assignment coming up on a place called Mountain Glen," Yang said, watching his face. Junior nodded but didn't seem worried or particularly impressed, which was probably a good sign. "We've tried to find out more about it, but there's not so much to go on. I figured you might know." "Yeah, I know about that hellhole." Junior sighed. "Information's pretty worthless too, so I'll give it to you in exchange for not tearing up my bar." "Generous of you, Junior." "Yeah, sure. Generous." He looked down to her weapons and then raised an eyebrow. "Anyway, Mountain Glen was the last big settlement attempt by Vale. Space was low, population the exact opposite, and there was a baby boom going on. There was a huge class divide too. Not enough jobs, and with high unemployment that started to make people desperate and advantageous, crime rates went through the roof. General unhappiness, all of which could potentially draw Grim." Junior shrugged. "You get the drill." "Sounds rough. It's not unusual. It happens every now and then, and if there isn't some disaster to cull the population. People think they're safe and sound behind their walls, but forget that we don't have the space to grow forever. Glen was meant to be a solution to that. A war town built with similar specs to Vale, which would be co-defended by Vale military and huntsman academies. For all intents and purposes, it was going to be Vale 2.0. But it failed, right?" "Sure did." He sighed and shook his head. "Before my time, you know? But I heard about it even so. There's more rumor than fact on why, and you can damn well bet no one in the know is talking. But whatever happened, the entire area got overwhelmed by Grim. They even started to fill the tunnels leading back to Vale, the ones they used to ship civilians and supplies out there in the first place." "A direct route to Vale," Weiss whispered in horror. "How did the Grim not invade the city?" "Through some pretty brutal tactics." The older man sighed. "The tunnels were sealed off. All those who lived within Mountain Glen left to die. Huntsmen were on the front lines, and from what I heard, some chose to stay behind to try and defend the people. You can imagine how that went." Yang's eyes drifted shut. She cursed quietly and shook her head. No wonder Jaune had said it was a failed settlement. It sounded horrible. "Necessary losses," Weiss said, in a voice that made it clear she felt they were anything but. That's what they said at the time too. Well, before the council went and swept it all under the rug. You so much as report on that, you're in trouble too. After all, when the next big population boom happens, they'll need to convince people to join the new frontier. A land of opportunity and adventure. Junior spat on the floor. Yang felt like doing the same. All those desperate people looking for better lives, only to be trapped and abandoned in a ghost town. What already sounded like a terrible mission now looked a whole lot worse. "Why you lot going there anyway?" Junior asked. "What does Beacon care about a place like that for?" "Where to find answers." Blake lied before Yang could answer. "It's an investigation into what might have caused the disaster, so it doesn't happen again." Junior hummed. She didn't think he believed the fondness, but he clearly figured if she felt like lying, he wouldn't get any other answer out of her. "That's all I've got on the place, I'm afraid. I could tell you the aftermath, the orphans, the political drama, and the protests, but I don't think you want to hear all that." No. You've done enough," Yang said. "Thanks, Junior. You're not all that bad. You'll forgive me if I don't say the same after what you and that maniac did to my club." "Hey now, that's no way to talk about my squad leader." Junior stiffened. She did too, especially when she noticed his hand twitch beneath the bar. Behind her, Weiss and Blake's hands fell to their weapons, and the sisters moved forward. "He's your team leader?" Junior breathed out. "Jaune is? Yeah. Problem?" "No. Junior sighed and stood back up. He nodded towards the twin sisters to back off, and though they did, Yang was acutely aware of the looks they sent her. There was anger there, yes, but also a strange hesitation. "We've done what you asked," he went on. "We didn't cause a scene and we sure as hell didn't approach you or do anything." Junior wiped a hand against his forehead and it came away wet. "I like it if you left now." Yang's eyes narrowed, but she didn't sense any danger, if anything. They felt all too passive. Where was the Junior of before? Why hadn't the sisters intervened like they did against her and Jaune's first fight? Why did the goons that had once surrounded them now leave a clear and undefended path back to the doors? "Yang," Blake whispered. "We've got what we need. We should go." "I agree. We should meet back with Jaune. We still have the camping equipment to deliver." Yang nodded and pushed herself up from the bar. "Thanks for the help, Junior," she said. He didn't nod back. He didn't even meet her eyes. Instead, he picked up her glass and began to polish it, only for his hands to shake and drop it. He cursed when it shattered, and the noise made the goons jump. Well, that was a thing. She shook her head and followed her teammates towards the door. En route, she paused by the twin sisters. The one in white backed away with a nervous expression, one hand clenched to her stomach and eyes wide. The other darted before her, arms wide as though to defend her from any attack Yang might launch. "Please leave," she gritted, in a tone that suggested she wasn't used to such niceties. "I didn't make that kind of impression of them," Yang thought. "No way in hell. But the only other person is Yang." Weiss called impatiently. "Come on. These bags are heavy and we need to catch our bullhead." "Coming," Yang called. She shot one final glare towards the pair, but stalked away with a shake of her head. It didn't matter. No matter what it was, they had a mission to do. There was no time for doubt. Winter hummed and looked up at the assorted clothing and equipment packed into her cases. The journey to Beacon had been an unexpected one, and only truly to thank the headmaster for his aid in resolving the incident with the stolen paladins. Atlas expected her back now, even if she would return in a week or two to watch her sister through the tournament itself. "It's a shame I can't stay to see Weiss off for her mission." Atlas. Duty called and she would answer. She would see Weiss again soon, and her sister would be more than fine on her mission. As much as Crow irritated her, she couldn't think of anyone less likely to allow harm to come to those under his care. Her team, too, were capable. Her right hand curled into a fist as she took a deep breath. Weiss's partner had not acted unfairly, even if his decision to not accept her sister's feelings was deeply flawed. She would not go so far as to say her sister had been rejected, for one could find no fault with Weiss. No. And her sister had also made it clear, begged, really, Winter not to intervene or extend punishment on him for his choice. Truly, Weiss was too kind at times. At least, she hoped that was the reason. If her sister still harbored feelings for him, then things might become more complicated. If only I could offer advice of my own. But in matters of the heart, it seems Weiss is more experienced than I. She might have asked her mother, were it not for the way that romance ended. In this, Weiss would have to find her own way. It could have been worse. Winter reminded herself. At least he was a gentleman with her. If he'd been anything but, then not even Crow could have stopped her extracting vengeance. A sigh escaped her and she shook her head. Such thoughts were pointless and didn't help Weiss or herself. Instead, she busied herself with the final few things to be packed away. The sooner she reported back, the sooner she could return to see her sister's performance. Perhaps by then, the whole issue would be resolved. The scroll on the dresser table began to vibrate. Winter's head snapped towards it, her feet carrying her across the room. Who could call at such a time? Her immediate thoughts were that it would be from the general, but bearing some disaster, she could not think why he might need her. And surely, she would have heard such of an event from Headmaster Osbin. Weiss, perhaps? The number was an unrecognizable one. With a sigh, she entered the call and placed it back down. It rang again. How persistent. She sighed. Some sales rep, no doubt, having brought her name off some list and decided to call her to sell some worthless services to the SDC. She considered blocking it, but knowing they would try again on another number, decided to answer it and dissuade them herself. Winter Snee, she snapped. It's about time you answered. A rough voice came through. It was unfamiliar and rude. Not someone who sought her favor then, otherwise there'd be far more simpering. Who is this? How did you acquire this number? I have my ways, Miss Snee. As for who, I suppose you can call me Silver. Silver? The name flickered in her head, a brief spark of recognition, but she could not place it. Crow Branwen may have mentioned me? Her eyes widened. The White Fang informer. The same. Her heart beat a little faster as she looked left and right, just to see if anyone was close by. Of course, there was no one. It was a private room. Why are you calling me? She asked. I wish nothing to do with you or your kind. Faunus? He sounded curious, perhaps even disgusted. Not Faunus, she corrected. Terrorist. A good distinction. I'm glad to hear it. Either way, I'm not here to make threats or discuss ethics. I bring information. Then why not speak to Crow? He trusts you, and so far as one can trust someone like you, Mr. Branwen won't be in a position to make use of the information. Winter's eyes narrowed. He knew about the upcoming mission. That was terrifying though, more so because her sister was on it. I have no idea what you mean, she said. I think you do. Her teeth ground together. I'm not your enemy, even if you might consider me yours. I'll cut to the chase. You are intending to leave Vale soon to return to your unit. Do not. Why? There is an attack planned on the city in a few days' time. Her pulse raced. One hand came down to rest on the dresser as she took several deep breaths. An attack? On the city itself? When? How many? Not many. It's not an invasion if that's what you fear. More of a terrorist strike, the usual manner for the White Fang. He sounded so dismissive and disgusted. At the very least, he sounded like he wasn't on their side. Why should I not tell the headmaster immediately? You can if you wish. Silver's voice was unconcerned. I would, however, keep the information to as few as people as possible. If it were to get back to the White Fang, the consequences might be terrible. In truth, I believe you could stop much of it yourself, hence my call. It could be a trap. Of that she was more than aware. She would humor him for now, but only a fool entered such a situation alone and unprepared. Tell me more, she said, but I make no promises. The target is the Central Plaza, the date unknown to me but within 3 to 4 days at most. The White Fang intend to smuggle Grimm into the city and then release them to cause havoc. She sneered, but didn't interrupt him. It sounded like typical White Fang tactics, and the strategist in her could see the reasoning for it. So close to the festival, and with so many international guests on their way, it would make Vale seem dangerous, and their protectors incompetent. It would also boost unrest against the Faunus, which, ironically, would increase racism as well. That was the worst thing about such terrorism. that people like the White Fang would willingly place the people they claim to represent in harm's way, because it would drive those innocent faunus, wrongfully hated by the people of Vale, into becoming terrorists themselves. I don't mind if you tell the headmaster, or if you tell the rest of Beacon's facility. I might have contacted them, but you were the easiest to reach. All I ask is that you find a reason to delay your departure and to watch the Central Plaza carefully. And how do I know this is not a trap? You don't. However, you can easily tell for yourself whether my words are true or not. You can watch the plaza from Beacon and react if anything happens. If it does not, and I have lied to you, then little is lost but your time. Time which she had no assigned task for. She tutted and looked away, even if he couldn't see her. It was like he knew more about her movements than she did. In fact, how did he know she intended to leave Beacon in the first place? That wasn't common knowledge. Who are you? Really? How do you know everything you know? If you're such an ally, why not approach us in person? I'm a friend. I'm well connected, and I believe your boss would have me in a cell faster than I could blink. Winter hesitated at his frank honesty. Well, he wasn't exactly wrong there. Do what you will with the information, Winter Snee. I bid you farewell. Wait! The scroll went dead a second later, leaving her to curse and recall the number. The device you have called has been disconnected. Winter growled and made to throw her scroll against the wall, only to pause and let out a long sigh instead. The general had much to say about those who let their anger dictate their actions, and her Snee temper had gotten her in more than one fair share of bother when she first enlisted. A potential attack. If she contacted the authorities, they could mobilize immediately to prevent it. But this Silver was correct. The White Fang would know and plan elsewhere, even if they did catch them in the act. The police were ill-suited to deal with terrorists. With a sigh, Winter dialed a different number. Miss Snee, is there a problem? Headmaster Ozpin. She sighed. I realize there's a lot to ask, but might I rely upon your hospitality for just a little longer? Jaune smiled as he watched the scroll he'd stolen on the night with Crow out plummet into the waves of the bottom of the cliffs of Beacon. Another job completed, and all evidence removed. Winter was as predictable as they came. She would stay. Her duty to the people, not to mention concern for her sister, would not allow her to do otherwise. That means when we come hurling through, we'll have her to bail us out, even if Ruby's teams do end up going on different missions elsewhere. CFVY should also be there as usual, so we should be fine. Winter was just insurance to make sure they came out in one piece. Even if she told Ozpin and the other teachers, that would just mean a faster response when they hit the breach. Yang would fight Neo and survive. Blake would take down Torchwick. And now Winter would be there to pick them up at the end. All he had to do was make sure everything happened in the right order.